I'm J.R. Church. Welcome to today's Prophecy in the News.
And I'm Gary Stearman. Today we're going to discuss another part in Eschatology 101, Chapter 5, The Secrets of Psalm 90.
It's a fascinating study. To me, this is the pivotal point of the foundational doctrine of the entire Bible. Moses gave us Genesis chapter 1, and Moses explains Genesis chapter 1 in Psalm 90. So stick around. You're going to enjoy today's program. Today we're looking at the secrets of Psalm 90. There are 17 verses in the Psalm, and they naturally divide into 7 parts, corresponding with the 6 days of creation and the 7th day wherein God rested. An outline of Psalm 90 would go something like this. The first 4 verses describe creation day 1. The 5th verse describes creation day 2. Creation day 3 would be 5 through 7. Creation day 4, 8 through 10. Creation day 5, 10 and 11. Creation day 6, verses 12 and 13. And the great Sabbath rest in verses 14 through 17. Moses not only wrote Psalm 90, but he also wrote 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, and 100. There are 11 stanzas here in the Song of Moses. And Gary Stearman is here to discuss with me the secrets of Psalm 90.
Well, J.R., let's begin by reading the first 4 verses. We can discuss them. Lord, thou hast been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever thou hadst formed the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, thou art God. Thou turnest man to destruction, and sayest, Return, ye children of men. Here's verse 4. For 1,000 years in thy sight are but as yesterday, when it's past, and as a watch in the night. J.R., those may be some of the most important words in the Bible.
There's the key that turns the lock to understand the millennial day concept. 1,000 years in thy sight are but as yesterday when it is past.
Yeah.
And of course Peter talked about that. A day equals 1,000 years with the Lord. And some modern theologians have said, well, that's an indeterminate time. No, it's not. If the Bible says it's 1,000 years equals the day of creation, that's what it means. And so when we look at these 6 days of creation laid out in Psalm 90, you will see that each one of those creation days fits the theme of the most important events of each of those years of each millennium. Now, something I want you to notice, Gary read in the first verse. He said, Thou hast been our dwelling place in all generations. That's not most generations. That's not 90% of the generations. That's all of them. But the fascinating thing about it is, if you'll go over to the last stanza, Psalm 100, in the last verse, you will find that Moses ends his song with, For the Lord is good, his mercy is everlasting, and his truth endureth to all generations. So he begins in Psalm 90 with, Thou hast been our dwelling place in all generations, and he concludes the last verse of the last stanza with, His truth endureth through all generations. Gary, that covers them all. That's 6,000 years plus 1,000 years of the Millennial Reign. And when everything is over and the final judgment is given and the wicked are cast into the lake of fire, then we see the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven. The universe is renovated with fire. There's a new heaven and a new earth wherein dwelleth righteousness. From the creation, when God said, Let there be light, to the recreation, that's all generations.
Well, God gave Moses the whole picture. Didn't leave anything out. And J.R., what's interesting is that woven through Psalm 90, we find something else. We find creation. And we find the 6 days of creation, just as clearly as you can imagine. Verse 2 talks about the formation of the earth. Verse 2 says, Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever thou hadst formed the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, thou art God. Now, J.R., that would be day 1.
Yeah. And actually, it takes us to the beginning, doesn't it?
It does.
And Genesis 1:1 says, In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And so we have here basically the same thing that it's talking about. And when God said, let there be light, there was light. God saw the light, that it was good, divided the day from the night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. So here we have the first day of creation, but even more remarkable than that, he said he turneth men to destruction. Gary, that's the first 1,000 years of humankind.
It is, and we have this terrible drama played out in the pre-flood era, in which sin came in the garden, and the descendants of Cain came to populate the earth. The fallen angels corrupted the morals of mankind. And all of that is woven in. If you know what to look for, it's all woven into this psalm.
Yes, and Adam lived 930 years. And Gary, he says in verse 4, 1,000 years in thy sight are but as yesterday, that's 930 years, and as a watch in the night. The rabbis say that's the other 70 years that Adam didn't live. Fascinating, isn't it? They wrap it all up in a nice, neat little bow.
And in fact, later on in this psalm, he refers to the 70 allotted to man. So it's all here.
Yeah. Now the rabbis say that Adam was going to live for 1,000 years. But when he came, God showed him all the panorama of every generation, what would happen in the future. When he saw David's birth, David died in infancy. And Adam said, oh, we can't have that. He's the lineage of the Messiah. So, now this is the rabbis talking, okay? So Adam gave him 70 years of his life. Therefore, Adam only lived 930 years and David lived for 70.
Amazing.
Amazing, isn't it?
Not only amazing, but it's a beautiful metaphor.
Yes.
Because it is as though through the life of Adam, God is saying to mankind, you go out and you finish what Adam started. You have those last 70 years.
Yeah. How about that? Well, it's a fascinating study here. Let's look at day 2, Gary, and talk about it.
Creation day 2, and let's begin in verse 5. Thou carriest them away as with a flood. Well, my goodness, what would that be? The flood. They are as asleep. In the morning they're like grass which groweth up. In the morning it flourisheth, groweth up. In the evening it is cut down and withereth. For we're consumed by thine anger, by thy wrath we are troubled. Now, let's start with the flood idea here.
That's in the second millennium, so we've got, day 2. Listen to day 2 of creation. God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters. Let it divide the waters from the waters. God made the firmament, divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. It was so. God saw the firmament, called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. Please notice, he did not say it's good. He did not say it's good. At the end of every other day, God said that's good, except for this time. And this would be the second day of creation, representing the second millennium of mankind and the great flood of Noah. Amazing.
It's amazing. And we have to ask ourselves here, starting in book 4 of the Psalms, Psalm 90. This is the Numbers book of the Psalms, J.R., the wilderness march. And what it is sort of the trek of mankind across history. And in all the verses of Psalm 90, we see the trek of mankind in those days of creation and then out beyond that. And we have here, just following the verse we have discussed in verse 6, in the morning it flourisheth, groweth up, in the evening is cut down wherewith. For we are consumed by thine anger, by thy wrath we are troubled. Thou hast set our iniquities before thee, our secret sins in the light of thy countenance. What would that be?
Well, it's fascinating. You talked about the grass there.
Yes.
Listen to day 3. And God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place. Let the dry land appear. That's what happened after Noah's flood. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth. Now, please understand, this is creation day. But it is a metaphor of what happened after the flood.
Right.
And God called the dry land earth, and he gathered together the waters he called seas. God saw that it was good. And God said, let the earth bring forth grass. There it is. The same thing you read there, see? In the morning it flourisheth, in the evening it withereth. And so he talked about grass and all of the vegetation. The earth brought forth grass, and the herb yielding seed after his kind. So this was day 3. Well, in the third millennium, we have a repopulation of the earth. We have the trees growing again, and the grass growing again, and all the fruit and the seed that was in the earth, all washed away by the flood, being renewed. Amazing.
We do. And I read on into the fourth day, just kind of continuity there. The fourth day, we're consumed by thine anger, and by thy wrath we're troubled. Thou hast set our iniquities before thee, our secret sins in the light of thy countenance. J.R., this fourth day, the fourth day of man featured drama.
Yes.
It's the rising of Israel, the crashing of Israel,
Yes.
The coming of David. And
all in the fourth millennium.
All in
Babylonian captivity.
Yes.
The Assyrian captivity.
Right.
Indeed. But notice he said, in the light of thy countenance.
Yes.
Listen to day 4. Day 4, God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night. Let them be for signs and seasons and days and years. Gary, it's so perfect here. Everything that Psalm 90 lists is the creation in chronological order. And then the bigger picture as it becomes a view of each millennium.
And you know, the lights in the fourth day would be David and David's son, the Lord Jesus Christ.
And the prophets.
And the prophets. Yes. All of those lights arose in that time, and metaphorically then the lights in the heavens refer to these people.
Yes. And you know, when you get to Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, the minor prophets, they're all not only lights in the sky, but they're there for signs. They give us the signs, the prophecies of the future. And that's what he said here. Let them be for signs and seasons and for days and years. Amazing, isn't it?
It is amazing. Continuing on, and again, we're reading in Psalm 90, the Psalm of Moses. And as we look at verse 9, for all our days are passed away. In thy wrath we spend our years as a tale that is told. The days of our years are 70 and if by reason of strength they be 80 years, yet is their strength labor and sorrow. Excuse me. For it is soon cut off, and we fly away.
Yeah.
What's that talking about?
Now those 70 years, 70. 70 years in a generation there. And of course, as the rabbis referred to verse 4, 1,000 years in thy sight are but as yesterday, and as a watch in the night. Those 70 years appeared to be a watch in the night. They appear to be the number of the days of man. But there are two things, one in the fourth, one in the fifth millennium, that this could refer to. In the fourth millennium, Israel went into Babylonian captivity for how many years? 70. But when Jesus came at the beginning of the fifth millennium, in AD 70, the Romans came and destroyed Jerusalem. So we've got a 70-year period in both the fourth and the fifth millennium, and we do not know which one it represents. It could represent both, but we know this for sure. It's there in Psalm 90, and it's a magnificent picture. Take your pick. It's the fourth day and the fifth day of creation. Listen to the fifth day here. It says, God said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and the fowl that fly above the earth, and the open heavens. He created great whales and every living creature that moveth. And the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply. And I want to stop right there and tell you, Gary, that when Jesus came and died on Calvary and rose again on the third day, you and all the generations of believers went forth to be fruitful and multiply. That's called soul winning. Jesus said, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. He said, you shall be witnesses unto me, both in Jerusalem, Judea, and to the uttermost parts of the earth. That's the same kind of statement here. that he says, be fruitful and multiply.
And in that day, the creatures in heaven were formed. And here in Psalm 90, verse 10, strength, labor, sorrow, for it is soon cut off, and we fly away. The metaphor of the birds that were created. Now, that can't be any coincidence.
Yeah,
It's
that's
a pattern.
the day of creation, the birds
Yeah.
to fly in the heavens. We fly away. Reference to the birds.
Right.
And a reference to the end of life
Yeah.
when we fly away. So it's really fascinating. Tell me about day 6.
Day 6, I'm going to start in verse 11. Who knoweth the power of thine anger? Even according to thy fear, so is thy wrath. So teach us to number our days, that we may apply our hearts unto wisdom. Return, O Lord, how long? And let it repent thee concerning thy servants. Wow.
Yeah.
Return, O Lord, how long?
So here we have the 6th day of creation.
We do.
And the 6th millennium. And at the end of the 6th millennium, he's going to return.
And that's what all the preachers are preaching. They have been now for decades. They've been saying Jesus is coming soon.
Yes.
So
Moses said it first. He said it in the Psalms. He said
Right.
this represents the 6th day of creation, and this represents the return. You see, he couldn't return if he hadn't been here once already.
yeah,
So this is the second coming of Christ.
it is.
So here we are in verse 24, Genesis 1. God said, let the earth bring forth a living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beasts of the earth after his kind. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth after his kind, and the cattle after his kind, and creeping things upon the earth. And God saw that it was good. And God said, let us make man in our image. Gary, that's the resurrection. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a metaphor of the resurrection, okay? This is the original creation. One of these days, at the end of the 6th millennium, when he returns, he's going to recreate us in the image of God. And let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, fowl of the air, cattle over all the earth. That's the millennial reign of Christ coming up. And he says, so God created men in his own image. In the image of God created he him, and God blessed them and said unto them, be fruitful and multiply. You notice that's spoken twice, one in day 5 and one in day 6. That's the 5th millennium and the 6th millennium. That means that the gospel will spread from Jerusalem around the world, reaching the sinner, reaching souls for Christ for 2,000 years. That's what it means. No wonder then the dispensation of grace has lasted for 2,000 years. It was predicted right here in the days of creation.
And in this, we have this phrase, so teach us to number our days. Now, that's a declaration. It's almost a command. Teach us to number our days. That's the important thing about reading the Bible and understanding prophecy, I think. And also, and it just hit me, this is the Numbers book of the Psalms.
Yes.
And back in the book of Numbers.
It's the first chapter in the Numbers.
First chapter in the Numbers book of the Psalms. And back in the book of Numbers, there was a census. But here, the idea of numbering is taken to a higher level.
Yes.
We're not just counting people here. We're counting spiritual truths and prophetic truths. Teach us to number our days that we may apply our hearts to wisdom. I think that's just fantastic.
Yeah, so here we are looking at Psalm 90, and every generation since Moses has had this.
Yeah.
From 1500 BC until the present day, Moses said, teach us to number our days. Well, he begins with all generations. He ends in Psalm 100, verse 5, with all generations. I think he means all the days, don't you? I think he means 6,000 years. He's trying to teach us in Psalm 90 that each day of creation represents 1,000 years of mankind's history. And it is not at the end of the 7th millennium that he says, teach us to number our days.
That's right.
It's at the end of the 6th day, of the 6th millennium, that he says, teach us to number our days. Fascinating.
Well, reading on, I'm going to read 14 through 17 here, the concluding verses. Oh, satisfy us early with thine mercy, that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Make us glad according to the days wherein thou hast afflicted us, and the years wherein we have seen evil. Let thy work appear unto thy servants, and thy glory unto their children. And the beauty of the Lord our God be upon us. And establish thou the work of our hands upon us. Yea, the work of our hands, establish thou it.
Yeah.
That's a prayer. And Moses here is appealing to the Lord. Establish the work of our hands. This is the cry of Israel.
Yes, this is the Messianic era.
It is.
This is the millennial reign of Christ. And so, on the seventh day, God ended his work which he made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. There it is. Isn't that amazing? Now, the fascinating thing about this is that you just read in Psalm 90 that he wanted us to number our days. And let me see if I can get over here to Psalm 90 right quick. I want to read it to you. This is most important. Make us glad according to the days wherein thou hast afflicted us, and the years wherein we have seen evil. This is at the end of 6,000 years when Jesus comes, establishes a messianic kingdom, and Moses says, make us glad. Make us glad for our affliction. Make us glad for all those evil days. Make us glad. What? Listen. In day one, Adam sinned and brought mankind crashing down. Mm-hmm. In day two, God sent the flood to destroy the world. And Moses says, make us glad. In day three, the Jews ended up in Egyptian bondage. Make us glad for Egyptian bondage. In day four, they ended up in Assyrian captivity and Babylonian captivity. Make us glad for all those, oh, mercy. In the fifth millennium, the Romans came and destroyed Jerusalem and carted the Jews off to the slave markets of the world. For the fifth and the sixth millennia, make us glad for all those days we've suffered.
Those days, those 2 days in the fifth and sixth millennium, we refer to as the Dark Ages, by the way.
Yeah.
That's when Israel was scattered out. And you're supposed to be glad for that. Well, you know, that's Moses' prayer.
That's right. But let me tell you, we will be glad. Because we will see from God's perspective, God's plan for mankind. We will see that all the suffering, and by the way, the Jews weren't the only ones. Adam wasn't the only one. You know, Noah wasn't the only one that suffered. We suffer. We suffer from the day we are born until the day we die. We go through a series of sufferings. We're walking through the valley of Baca, so to speak, the vale of tears. And I want you to know that when this life is over, and we look back and reflect upon life, all those deep valleys of sorrow and tears will actually be mountain peak experiences for us, because we will have learned something about God's plan for our lives.
In your article in Prophecy in the News, which, by the way, is worth studying in depth. We only have a short time here on these programs to deal with heavy subjects. But if you study the magazine and read some of the quotes and some of the supporting materials, historical materials, you'll find great insights. J.R. quotes Rabbi Avraham Foyer, and he wrote a commentary on the Psalms. And concerning this passage, J.R., he says, specifically, we await the most monumental accomplishment of Jewish history, the final reconstruction of the third Beis HaMikdash, that is, the Holy Temple. And actually, he says, since the destruction of the second temple, God has been slowly reconstructing the edifice in heaven. Now, that's the Jewish view. When it is completed, God will display his works by bringing the celestial temple down to earth. So, even in the darkest of hours, the Jews somehow turned this into light.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
It certainly is. We know that Israel is suffering today. Look at what Israel suffered in the Holocaust. 6 million Jews died. Men, women, children, murdered, slaughtered by the Nazis. And they cried out, where was God? Where was God during the Holocaust? But I can tell you that even though they're suffering today in Israel, God has brought them back, but their suffering is not over. They got to go through Jacob's trouble. Paul said, for the suffering of this life, which is but for a moment, is not to be compared with the glory of the life to come. If we suffer with him, we shall also reign with him. You know, all the rewards we talk about in the Bible, when they get to the judgment seat of Christ, those rewards, you know, you win a soul, you get a soul winner's crown. You do good by giving some food to some hungry people, and you win another crown. And you do this for the Lord, and you win another. What about the suffering? Oh, yes. There's a crown for suffering. And I know that it's difficult for us to understand why we suffer pain. I had a minister tell me yesterday that sometimes the Lord gives us the ministry of pain. It's hard to understand, but if we'll just glorify God through our pain and our sicknesses and our sufferings, one day we'll be glad. We'll look back on this and say, oh, I wish I had some buttered manna to eat while I was going through that.
Amen.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, you know, Paul said, and Paul had a deep, heartfelt sadness for his people. But he said this in Romans 11:12. Now, if the fall of them, that is the Jews, be the riches of the world, and the diminishing of them, the riches of the Gentiles, how much more their fullness? Yeah. So Paul saw this end from the beginning idea. He knew that Israel had fallen, but he also envisioned their fullness.
Yes.
This is exactly what we're talking about. And he talked about a mystery too. In Romans 11:25, I would not, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own conceits. That blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in, and so all Israel shall be saved. And you know, all Israel kind of takes me back to the words of the Psalm of Moses. All generations, you know. Yep. The plan of God includes all generations.
Yes, it does. So, the article is in our May edition of Prophecy in the News magazine. If you don't have it, you don't subscribe. I urge you to get it today. You can call the phone number at the bottom of your screen, 1-800-475-1111, and order it today. It's $2.95, but hey, why not subscribe for the next year? If you will, ask those that you're talking to on the phone when you call to order this to tell you about the bonuses. We give you 4 free books or 3 free videos, your choice, if you will subscribe to Prophecy in the News magazine. And may I say that this last month of April, very difficult month financially. It seemed like every April is. I guess the government's taking more and more of people's tax money. We need to hear from you. We need to build back up. Don't let us have a bad summer, okay? I'm J.R. Church with Gary Stearman. Until next time, keep looking up.
Prophecy in the News is a viewer-supported ministry sponsored by our many friends across America and in your area. For your gift of $10, you can receive a special edition of our current program on an audio CD, or for a gift of $20, we'll send you our programs on DVD videos. For either order, call the 800 number on your screen right now.